We are eagerly looking forward to your talk, sir. Please start.
Okay. Thank you, Vimal, sister. And first of all, I extend my warm and hearty greetings to all those who are participating in today's program. My best wishes to all of them. Today, the topic is the dweller on the threshold. Now, this term, dweller on the threshold, is a very strange term, but it appears I went through the theoretical literature. And then I could appreciate the meaning of the term and why it has been used many in writings by Blavatsky and even masters. And then I got curious to know about it more, and then I collected material from the various theoretical literature and put in a form of note, and that I'm sharing with you. The term, the dweller on the threshold, appears at many places in the work of Blavatsky and also some other theoretical writers, including Mahatma. To understand the real meaning of them, its functions, and ways to how to overcome then their obstructive function is very important for all, and particularly for a spiritual seeker. The term invented by Bodwell Lytton in his famous work Genoni, wherein he describes a story as follows. When Glinden was the actor in that novel, was left by Manure in the old castle in Terry, he found two vases which he had received directions not to open. But disobeying these, he took out these stoppers, and at once the room was filled with intoxication, and soon the awful, loathsome creature appeared, those blazing eyes shone with malignant glare, and penetrated in Glyden's soul with a rush of horror such as he had never known. Now, this book of Genoni is a mystic book, and this was created sometime after the reign of Napoleon in France, when there was a lot of disorder in the society, and terror was ruling, and many things happening. At that time, this came a mystic novel, and it is also believed that Mahatma's hand was there in composing and creating this mystic novel, which is basically the teaching on person who is moving on the spiritual path and how much obstruction he will face in the society and from within himself or herself, and how to overcome that. So this is a allegorical story and mystic story, and of considerable importance for a spiritual seeker. Now, in this story, Lytton, which is a desire to show that opening of the vases is like the approach of an inquirer to the secret reaches of his own nature. When, as a spiritual seeker, any of us move on this path, then it is also written in other literature of theoretical writing that our secret reaches, that means our inner nature comes out, whether for good or bad. So here he is referring to that. He opens the receptacles and at first is full of joy and a sort of intoxication due to new solutions offered for every problem in life and to the dimly vast vistas of power and advancement that open before him. So when the inner nature opens out, so first of all, we see our good part which is in, and then also comes that bad part, which becomes terrifying. The vases are kept open long enough, the dweller of the threshold surely appears, and no man is exempt from the sight, because every man or every woman has some weaknesses, some faults hidden in his or her nature, and they come out. So it says no man or woman is exception to this rule. Goodness is not sufficient to prevent its appearance, because even the good man who finds a muddy place in the way of his destination must have necessarily passed through to reach the end. So outwardly good character is not sufficient to save us from this dweller of threshold. That means whatever hidden our weaknesses are there, and they have to be overcome by oneself. if the seeker has to reach the goal of his path. The inner struggle of a candidate culminates in his facing the dweller on the threshold, which is the mocking demon of illusion, Mara, and mental deposits accrued by the ego in all its combined incarnations on earth, including the distributive aspects of thereof. That means whatever these negative feeling tendencies and wicked type of thoughts uh, are hidden and acquired even from the past incarnation, the tendencies, those will come out on this path. The voice of the silence describes it thus: Mara is personified temptation through men's vices, and translated literally means that which kills. That Mara, one of the term used in light of Asia also, and which describes the inner enemy which obstructs the path of the seeker. That is dweller of the threshold. The dweller threshold is described in many ways. We'll go along and we'll see that. So Mara in the voice of silence describes as personified temptation, because human nature is to get tempted by so many worldly things, and that temptation itself is personified as Mara, or dweller on threshold. And literally means Mara, that kills the soul. It is represented as a king of the Maras with a crown in which shines a jewel of such luster that it blinds those who look at it. This luster, referring to, of course, the fascination exercised by the voice upon our certain natures. Every disciple must face and conquer his self-created Mara before he can enter the threshold. Now, this Mara creates fascination to so many objects, things, and ideas. Fascination may not be only to only concrete objects. It will be certain ideas, certain ceremonies, certain rituals, which have been represented to us in a fascinating way. So all those create a obstruction, and those are termed the threshold. In fact, it is the combined evil influence that is the result of the wicked thoughts and acts of the age in which anyone can live, and assumes to each student a definite shape at each appearance, being always either of one sort or changing each time. Here another point is brought. This is that besides the personal and hidden vices, nature of vices, tendencies, so there are certain characteristics of the race or age in which we live. For example, we are living in Kali Yuga, we are living in Indian society. So that nation, that particular nation or that particular age also has certain general bad characteristics which also affect the path of the individual seeker. And they also appear at the obstruction and dwell on the threshold. So that with one, it may be as Bulwer Lytton pictured it, or with other, only a dreaded horror, or even of any other sort of shape. So this dweller threshold appears in many types and many forms, maybe just bad feeling, despondency, or some sort of demonic fear also, which may appear in dream or in dreaming consciousness. It is specialized for each incident and given its form by the tendencies and natural physical and psychic combinations that belong to his family and nation. So the type of dweller threshold which each candidate will face depending on his own inner traits, bad traits and evil traits, which is brought out from the previous incarnations, and also from the family and the nation and the age in which he is born, and by which thought and tendencies his general outlook is affected. General outlook is affected uh, and influenced. Master in a letter says the path to occult science has to be trodden laboriously and crossed at the danger of life, that every new step in it leading to the final goal is surrounded by pitfalls and cruel thorns, that pilgrim who ventures upon it is made first to confront and conquer. So this is the different term for the same cruel thorns and pitfalls. All those are defined by the master letter, and every every pilgrim, that means every spiritual seeker who is trying to move on the spiritual path, has to face all this. And he has to confront and conquer the 1,001 furies who keep watch over its adamantine gates and entrance. 1,001, that means maybe a numberless such attributes or such tendencies we have to control within ourselves. Some of their example is given by Master in a letter. The fury is called doubt, skepticism, scorn, ridicule, envy, and finally temptation, especially the latter. When we move a certain path from our trodden traditional path, we have certain doubts whether we are going the right way or wrong way. And this doubt persists for many times, for many stages. Then skepticism, if the progress is not appreciable, then person will be skeptic whether he has moved the wrong path. Then scorn, that person has to face scorn from family member, from associates who are following traditional path. Then ridicule by again the family members and society, and envy and finally temptation. And some people may envy us and they tempt us also. And temptation is emphasized by the master. This is the very important threshold, which may lead the sadhaka to divert from the real path. These furies are also sort of the dweller threshold obstructing the path. All we read in the Johar, another Kabbalist work on the Satan, shows plainly that this personage is simply the personification of the abstract evil, which is the weapon of the karmic law and karma. The Satan, as mentioned in the Kabbalic literature, particularly the Bible and both the Testament, it is again not something outside, but it is karmic effect produced by our own karma. It is our human nature and man himself, as is said, that Satan is always near and inextricably interwoven with man. It is only a question of that power being latent or active in us. Sometimes our evil nature, or satanic nature, or asuric nature, as mentioned in Gita, may be latent in our own inner nature, or sometimes may be active, depending on the circumstances, outside circumstances which you face. Ashish Madhvacharya, in his book, Man, Son of Man, says, our other bodies grow and decay with the passage of time. Our other body, our the outer body. And so these bodies of feeling, charge, memory, structures, which we have created and are creating by our every action. But our bodies of the, say, astral and kama-rupa, they continue for some time, and their life depends upon the intensity of our negative feelings and thoughts which we have generated in the life. The imprint of our feeling memory complex is material reality that under certain circumstances is mild, similar to the schizophrenic disturbances of the psychic, can become charged with our life and seem to take an independent existence. Many times those astral spooks, which you have mentioned in philosophical literature, if the person who has died physical death and has a lot of evil tendencies and feelings, remnant, has not been wiped out before death, so that will persist in the spook or the astral cell for a longer time. Here that is mentioned. Now, this also acts as a threshold, our evil genius. And this Dwara threshold will affect the even new incarnated astral body of the soul. In Greek, it is called kakatomos, that drives us always to the evil that we would not. So this entity drives us to the evil, though we know that that is the evil. We will not do otherwise, but that drives it. Each time we obey its subhuman prompting to seek the easy, the comfortable, the materially advantageous, we add to its life and power and prolong its existence, and as often as attempt to turn our faces to heaven and guide our actions by the divine light of human intelligence, its power is weakened, and its darkness replaced by the bright form, the lighter higher form. It means to say that at every time the situation comes, our weakness rises from within. Then, if we exercise our viveka, discrimination, and we get tempted by the easier path, comfortable path, and what seems to be more tempting and advantageous in the nearest future, if you follow that path, if you follow that choice or accept that choice, then this tolerance threshold gets strengthened. And if we try to see from the universal point of view, from a idealistic point of view, not from the just idea of comfortable and easy path, but based on the principle, noble principles, then this tolerance threshold gets weakened. In fact, in light of a path also, the master says that one of the reasons for man to do evil act is that he is susceptible to easier choice. Normally, when choice comes alive, we try to follow the shortcut path or easier path, which does not involve much trouble, which involves compromise of the principle. Then we get into this traits and habits, and that obstruction created on our spiritual path. In the voice of silence, it is mentioned that on the Paramita's path, the disciple has to fight his own way through 7 portals, 7 strongholds held by the cruel, crafty powers of passions became complex psychological forces such as anxiety, anger, etc. These powers of passion and also the 8 dire miseries with malice, sloth, pride, doubt, desire, delusion, ignorance, and expectation for future lives are also sort of dwellers on the threshold and which obstruct the path of the disciple. This is from the voice of silence. Now, Brodsky says that though the term dweller threshold was invented by Burwell Lytton in his work Janoni, but in occultism, the word dweller is an occult term used by students for long ages past and refers to certain maleficent astral doubles of defunct persons. Now let us see where the dwellers dwell. Around each person are planes or spheres or physical body, beginning with the Atmic and running down to the gross matter physical body, or planes. These zones extend by lateral boundaries all around the being. That is to say, if we figure ourselves as being in the center of this sphere, we will find there is no way of escaping or skipping any one zone because it extends in every direction until we pass its lateral boundary. That means all our subtle body is starting from etheric double, astral body, lower mental, higher mental, buddhic, all are surrounding us, and our physical body is centered in between. So our existence is surrounded by so many spheres, and there's no way we can escape it. That means we cannot escape the bad effect of the astral body if we have created the seeds of the bad traits and evil feelings in that, and we have to face that. When the student has at last got a real aspiration and some glimmer of blazing goal of truth, where masters stand and has also aroused the determination to know and to be, the whole bent of his nature, day and night, is to reach out beyond the limitations that hitherto has fettered his soul. No sooner does he begin this to step a little forward, then he reaches the zone just beyond mere bodily and mental sensations. At first, the minor dwellers of the threshold are aroused. Now here is trying to explain where we face this zone. As and when we try to go beyond our bodily sensations, we just enter the astral body, because astral body has also 7 subplanes and all those things. It's more coincident. So the first elementals which try to obstruct us, they are the first dweller of threshold. These are minor dwellers of threshold aroused. That means our minor wrong tendencies, which we have been not able to subdue in our life, arouse. And they, in temptation, in bewilderment, in doubt or confusion, assail us. They appear as doubt, confusion, all that thing. He only feels the effect, but they do not reveal themselves as shapes, and persistence in the work takes the inner man farther along. So these minor dwellers appear as the only effects on our, say, nature. That means they create some irritants on the path, some doubts, some delusion, and all those things. But if the seeker persists and ongoing, so they are completely left behind, and then we have to face the other dwellers. That means teaching is that we must persist in the work despite these minor dwellers. But persistence in the work takes the inner man further along, and with that progress comes a relation to the outer mind of the experienced man, and then at the mental level, those mental tendencies, which evil tendencies, which we have cultivated in the past incarnation or from the race or the family, they also appear. Until the last has worked up the whole force of the evil power, they naturally arrayed against the good, and he has said before, and all the forces of evil mental thinkings, mental tendencies, whether of the individual one or the as a public or as a nation or as age, they try to attack him, which have been affecting him unwittingly in his normal life. Then the dweller takes what form it is. And that time the dweller takes some type of form, like a demon or some other form, which is again creation of man's own imagination, which he has been imagining unconsciously. That it does take some definite shape or impress itself with palpable horror is a fact testified by many students. So it says that this has been testified many students who have who have progressed on the occult path. This is also mentioned by Blodsky in her article in the SPV Teaches Anthropology, article Theoretical Mahatmas. Now, what are the types of dwellers? Annie Besant, in her book, The Introduction and Introduction to Yoga, described the dwellers saying that there are many kinds of dwellers. The first are the elementals. They try to bear individuals in the astral plane because of the destructive tendencies of human beings. Elementals of both of nature, good and bad. So if you have got bad emotions, bad feelings, those feelings, emotions becomes a creature itself and vitalized by elementals of that nature, and they appear first at the threshold, astral plane. This is the voice of silence. This stage is called this hall of learning, where it is said that there is a serpent coil below the every flower, every fragrance of flower. The second are the evil thought forms of our own. The first is the astral elementals, and the second are the evil thought forms of our own past. The thought forms, as we have been told in our theoretical literature, that every thought, whether small or big or some trivial thought, they cling to our personality till the time of death. But their life also depends upon the intensity which we have created and the feeling with which is associated. So here is talking about that. The most terrible of all the thought forms, the remnant, and most terrible of this is again, third one, the remnant astral and material bodies of a previous incarnation that attaches itself to the new astral and mental bodies of the current life. So the first are elementals in the astral plane, then the thought forms of having evil tendencies in the mental plane, and then the remnant astral and mental bodies of the previous incarnation that attach to the later incarnations, and they try to obstruct the progress of the disciple. So thus dwellers may be found in cases First, incipient bad tendencies, feelings and thoughts in one's own mind, like languor, doubt, despondency, carelessness, laziness, hankering after objects or worldly mindedness, delusion, non achievement of a stage, inability to find a footing, lack of self confidence, wavering tendencies, or instability of mind, etc., are distractions, vikshepa, as mentioned in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So vikshepas are, they are also dwell threshold. Then the five kleshas are afflictions I mentioned in the Yoga Sutra are ignorance, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinavesh. These are again hinder the progress and they also act on threshold. Such obstacles and afflictions may also be considered as dwellers. In the case of the separation of triangle from the quaternary, now this phrase is mentioned for that state when after death and before entering the Devachan, there is struggle between the upper duad and lower duad in the Kamloka. That means Kamrupa and the mind and the Buddhi and Atma. That means there is a upper duad, that means Atma and Buddhi monad, and lower is mind and Kamrupa. There is struggle, intense struggle. And if the mind has less of very small good tendency, then mind gets separated, or mental manas gets separated from buddhi, and then falls back, and there it disintegrates over time, and that page of life is forgotten or torn, as mentioned in the philosophical literature. So this refers to that. That means when the separation occurs just at the threshold of devachan between the two upper and lower tendencies of the soul, our personal soul and the divine soul. The astral cell of the same individual in a previous incarnation, the personality during the earlier incarnation may have been so strong but selfish or materialistic that its animal life had not worn itself out. It may incarnate itself a number of times with the parent ego or causal body. There may come a point, however, when the parent ego acquires new personality and no longer uses the old astral cell, which still has animal life in it. The latter, however, is still drawn to the parent ego and becomes a malevolent influence. This is the dual threshold. In few cases, it is mentioned in theosophical literature that in normal case, of course, the astral cell or astral body disintegrates before the soul moves to Devachan. But maybe some cases where our wrong feelings and emotions have been so strong that astral cell persists to exist and the soul moves to Devachan and reincarnates with a new astral body. But in that case, the remnant astral spoof or cell, which is already there in existence astral plane, tries to influence the new astral body of the incarnated soul and aggravates its bad tendency. So this is also described as the worst type of dweller threshold. Regarding this one, the Blavatsky says when karmic desires and passions are so intense that the Kam Rupa persists in Kam Loka beyond the Devachanic period of the ego and thus survives the reincarnation of Devachanic entity. For example, when reincarnation occurs within 200 or 300 years, that means when our Devachanic stage is very short, the dweller being drawn by affinity towards the reincarnating ego to whom it had belonged and being unable to reach it, fastens on the karma of the new personality and becomes the dweller on the threshold, strengthening the comic element and tendencies and thus tending it a dangerous potency. That means increases the potency of the negative feelings and negative tendencies in new astral body, and with the result, some become mad from the cause and also lose their balance or in the physical life. In the case of people who have very little devachan, the greater part of the unconscious remains in Kamloka and may last far beyond normal period of 150 years and remain over until the next incarnation of the spirit. This then becomes the dweller on the threshold and fights with the new astral. So these are various types of dwellers of the threshold. That means elementals. First we mentioned minor dwellers, and then mental or thoughts which forms the wrong manner with the wrong thoughts and evil thoughts. They are also act dwellers. And then, of course, when the struggle happens with upper dual and the lower dual before entering the Devachan, and then in the remnant of the astral cell of the past life, the karmic tendencies are very strong, and the energy is has not exhausted before the soul takes another incarnation from Devachan after it's a short period of 150 or 200 years. So these are the various types of dweller threshold mentioned. So what is the effect of dweller threshold? The dwellers on the threshold create much hindrance on our spiritual path and also in living a noble worldly life. But man has power either to strengthen or weaken their powers by his mental attitude. The only solution is to keep our mind pure and open and feeling pure. That is why all the importance to purifying the mind and feeling in real spiritual practices. Once that is done, then we dangers from these threshold lesson. Now some allegorical descriptions are given, which I share with you. Brodsky wrote that Robert Stevenson's story, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, is but another allegory of the same true phenomenon or the divine dweller threshold. Then armies of Mara, who stormed Siddhartha Gautama just before he got enlightenment, as mentioned in the Light of Asia. This very detailed description, the Light of Asia, how the king of Mara attacked with all his big army, that means with evil powers, evil tendency, the Siddhartha Gautama before he got enlightenment. Then armies of Kauravas, facing which Arjuna saw his close relative, teachers, etc., and with thought of fighting them, fell under despondency. So that is the allegorical meaning, allegorical interpretation of the two armies facing Arjuna facing the Kauravas. Now, some instances mentioned in theoretical writings, again, I'll share with you. The Mahatma letters refers to the actual case of Stanton Moses, the famous medium who was tormented by dwellers in September 1875. In September 1875, Stanton Moses asked Madame Blavatsky whether Bulwer Lytton had eaten underdone pork, uncooked pork, chops, and dreaming when he wrote about the dweller threshold. Let me ask Blavatsky whether all these are imaginary things brought out by Lytton. Then Blavatsky replied, "Make yourself ready." She answered, "In about 12 months more, you will have to face and fight with them." So it just happened in October 1876. The talk with Blavatsky happened by Moses in September 1875. And in October 1876, the predicted event happened. Moses wrote, "I am fighting a hand-to-hand battle with all the legions of the fiend for the past 3 weeks. My nights are made hideous with their torments, temptations, and foul suggestions. I see them all around, glaring at me, gabbling, howling, grinning. Every form of filthy suggestions of bewilderment, doubt, of mad and shuddering fear is upon me. I can understand Janoni's dweller now. I have not wavered yet, and their temptations are fainter, the presence less near, the horror less." See, it is quoted by, again, Mahatma in his letter. Number 18. Now, and the instance is quoted Mahatma letter. To him, no, about the two clever dribblers of the threshold, as Bulwer would call them, with the gopal kept by us to do our scavengers work and to draw out the latent vices, if there be any, from the candidates. and Fun was shown himself on the whole far better and more moral than he was supposed to be. Uh, Now here an indication is given that master sometime himself creates a obstruction, which he calls dweller on threshold, to test the intensity or devotion, perseverance of the disciple. So Fun was such a person, and here master gives indication that Dugapal is Doc Chauhan's, agency of Doc Chauhan's, were creating obstruction in his path, and he was fighting that battle. The master was observing, and master concludes that Fern, by his proper conduct and pure thought and pure feeling and persistence, he overcome those dwellers, those obstructions, and he proved a good disciple. So sometimes these dweller threshold, they come to test the disciple, to test the sadhaka, their mental strength, their sincerity, their power, and we have to pass that test before we move further. So, another instance is mentioned by W.P. Judge in his work Werner Blooms, who writes, one incident related to him that he sight as an enormous slug with evil eyes whose malignancy could not be described. Another says that he has seen the dweller concentrated in the apparent form of dark and sinister looking man, whose slightest motions, whose mental glance express the intention and ability to destroy the student's reason. And only the strongest effort of will and faith could dispel the evil influence. The strongest effort of will and faith. This is necessary to dispel the influence, evil influence of the dweller on threshold. And the same student at the other times has felt it as a vague or terrible horror and seemed to enwrap him in his fold. Uh, before this, he has retreated for the time to prepare himself by strong self-study to be pure and brave for the next step. So here any indication is given that self-study, deep study of philosophy of life, like theosophy, following its tenets in our life, and making our life and feeling, particularly feeling and thought pure, they give us proper shield, an adequate shield to fight these dwellers on threshold and to overcome them. Now, T. Subbarao in the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, introduction part describes the dweller threshold both in its figurative aspect and in reality. He said historically, the great battle of Mahabharata was a struggle between the two families. Philosophically, it is a great battle in which the human spirit has to fight against the lower passions in the physical body. Many of our readers have probably heard about the so-called dweller on the threshold, so evidently described in Ditter's novel Janoni. According to his author's description, the dweller on the threshold seems to be some elemental or other master mysterious form appearing before the neophyte just as he is about to enter the mysterious land and attempting to shake his resolution with menace of unknown dangers if he is not fully prepared. There is no such master in reality. This description that there is no such master outside in reality, but there is the only sadhaka's inner tendencies, inner feelings only. That is what he tries to say. The description must be taken in figurative sense, but nevertheless, there is a dweller on the threshold whose influence on the mental plane is far more trying than any physical terror can be. The real dweller on the threshold is form of the despair and despondency of the neophyte, who is called upon to give up all his old affections for kindred, parents, and children, as well as his aspirations for objects of the worldly ambition, which have perhaps been his associates for many incarnations. When we called upon to give up these things, the neophyte feels a kind of blank before he realizes his higher possibility. After having given up all his aspirations, his life itself seems to vanish into thin air. He seems to have lost all hope and to have no object to live and work for. He sees no sign of his own future progress. All before him seems darkness. and a sort of pressure comes upon the soul, under which it begins to droop. And in most cases, he begins to fall back and gives up the further progress. But in the case of a man who really struggles and will battle against that danger, despair, and be able to proceed on the path, I may here refer to a few passages in Mill's autobiography. Now, here T. Subbarao says that a stage comes at the and with every sadhaka on the spiritual path when this thought of despondency and despair face him, and many sadhakas they fail and they droop and they move away from the spiritual path. But those of such persons are sadhakas who persist by their willpower, strong willpower, and by their nature and viveka, they progress and they overcome such evil tendencies. Here, this T. Subbarao quotes one Mill's autobiography, how it happens with him. Of course, the author, knew nothing of occultism, but there was one stage in his mental life which seems to have closely resembled what I have been describing, that will dwell on threshold. Mill was a great analytical philosopher. He made an exclusive analysis of all mental processes, mind, emotions, will, and wrote. I now saw or thought I saw what had always received with incredibility. I now saw or thought I saw that had always received with incredibility, that the habit of analysis has a tendency to wear away the feelings, as indeed it has when no other mental habit is cultivated. Thus, neither selfish nor unselfish pleasures were pleasure to me. That means, as you mentioned, he was only an analytical philosopher. He was not going into occulting philosophy, the wholeness things. And this tendency he realized, only divisive tendencies or divisive philosophy also leads one to the such situations like of having a tolerance threshold. That means distractions and dejections are faced by him. At last, he came to have analyzed the whole man into nothing. At this point, a kind of melancholy came over him, which had something of terror in it. In this state of mind, he continued for some years until he read a copy of the Wordsworth poems full of sympathy for natural objects and human life. From them, he says, I seem to learn that would be the perennial sources of happiness when all greater evils of life should have been removed. Subbarao is here mentioning that Mill, when he was found himself in desponding position because he was an analytical philosopher, but when he read the Wordsworth poem, which depicted the respect for life, oneness, etc., then his feeling completely changed and he got relief from the dwelling threshold. So right philosophy of life is very necessary to overcome this dwelling threshold. This feebly indicates that when the chela must experience, when he is determined to renounce all old estates and is called to live on a higher plane, this transition stage was more or less the position of Arjuna before the discourse of Gita. He was about to engage in a war of extermination against foes led by some of his nearest relations, Guru, and he not unnaturally shrank down from the thought of killing kindred and friends. We are each of us called upon to kill out all our passions and desires, which have been very dear to us. Not that they are necessarily evil in themselves, but that these influences must be inherited before we can establish ourselves on the higher planes. For example, Master in letters say that all personal attachments, even of noble nature, have to be given way before we can move on the spiritual path. So renouncing personal attachment, affectionate attachment to our own kith and kin becomes very difficult, but it is necessary to move on spiritual path, because unless universal love is developed, universal affection, universal compassion developed, the path is not open, higher path is not open. The position of Arjuna is intended to typify that of a chela who is called upon to face the Durand threshold as the Guru prepares his chela by the trials of the initiation, by the philosophical teaching. So at this critical point, Krishna proceeds to instruct Arjuna. As we all know, the first few lines of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is teaching Arjuna to not fear the death. There's no death. That is the first lesson he gives. That means the soul is not dying. That's the first lesson you have to get. And once we get rid of the fear of death, then that personal attachment becomes weaker. How to be free from their effects? To be free from the obstacles of minor dwellers, one should do constant practice of one truth or principle. Following truth for life is mentioned very necessary for overcoming the dwellers in the threshold. This is also mentioned in Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Truthful life, following principle of truth, Satya. Also, one should cultivate attitude of friendliness without jealousy towards those who are joyful, have compassion towards those who are unhappy and less fortunate, delight in and support the acts of virtuous, and be impartial to and avoid the dramas of the impure. This is mentioned in the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. Then klesha should be attenuated by practicing Kriya Yoga and by meditation. All of these are resolved through meditation. When you remember your essential nature, unbounded constant, essential nature to know yourself is very important on this path, and that knowledge itself, what we really are, can help us to overcome the furies of the ignorant threshold or weaken their power to obstruct our path. The voice of the silence says that second hall should be crossed safely. Second hall means hall of learning. By not stopping there to inhale the fragrance of the stupefying blossoms in hall of learning, that is by not getting tempted to psychic perceptions and siddhi. Lower siddhis is mentioning, we should not get tempted by that. They, that means our masters, are subservient to the time-honored laws and rules of a brotherhood to which they belong. And one of the first rule it demands that those who start on their journey eastward means on a spiritual path, as a candidate to the notice and favors of those who are the custodians of those mysteries that we masters, should proceed by straight road without stopping on every side way and pass seeking to join other masters and professors, often of the left-hand signs. That they should have confidence and show trust and patience, besides several other conditions to fulfill. Truly the door of threshold or within. It many times happens with members of Theosophical Society also, that though we have realized that Theosophical teaching and path prescribed are affecting our inner nature and they appear to be true, but many times, many of us, we move on so many gurus and agencies in the name of spirituality and religious curiosity, and that creates distraction. Here the reference is that once we move that side lanes, then the Dwara threshold rise up and we strengthen them. The Dwara threshold is not the product of the brain, but is an influence found in the plane that is extraneous to the student, but in which his success or failure will be due to his own purity. That means a Dwara threshold concept is not something imagined by brain, but this is a reality, and it is created by the man himself in his own astral and mental bodies as mental plane. It is not a thing to be dreaded by the mere devoted theosophist, and no honest one who feels himself absolutely called to work persistently to higher planes of development for the good of humanity and not for his own need, fear, or that heaven or hell holds. And that is why universal brotherhood without any distinction is the first object. And if candidate or if all of us or any of us we are following that sincerely, then we have little to fear from this dual of threshold. Desires and passions should be annihilated. beyond chance of resurrection, that the personal desires and passions. We must turn our faces to heaven, our highest ideal, thoughts, and our actions by the divine light of the human intelligence or by our inner wires, freeing ourselves from the superstition belief and practice. Freeing from superstition belief and practice is very important. This also emphasized Mahatma letters, that division and hierarchy of such bodies which affect man's fate is a superstition, and we have to get rid of that. The foes like ambition, anger, hatred, even shadow of desire have to be chased away. Remembering that fight is for the man's liberation. Each failure is success, and each sincere attempt wins reward in time. The candidate may fail at times, but he should not succumb to the failure, saying that each failure gives another experience to mount the scale of the ladder of the success. The fruit of wrong action is sorrow, the fruit of right action is joy. That means karmic law, we must believe. We must take responsibility for our thoughts, words, and actions by living consciously. That means consciously we create our thoughts and feelings, not unconsciously. The Yoga Sutras are a path of purification, refinement, and surrender. Our essential nature is usually overshadowed by the activity of mind. This means our spiritual practice should be to look within. Our true self lies hidden in the silence between our thoughts, beyond all limitations. However, the doubts, chaos, and confusion of our thoughts cause us to forget what we really are. And here comes the importance of meditation of awareness or mindfulness, which is very helpful in looking at our thoughts and getting rid of our evil thoughts. Vairagya, detachment, must pervade all virtues. Endeavor is finding joy in doing what is good. To do that is necessary to remove anything that counteracts it, especially laziness. Laziness has three aspects: having no wish to do good, being distracted by negative activities, and understanding oneself by doubting one's ability. Related to these are taking unique pleasure in idleness and sleep, and being indifferent to samsara, the problem of samsara, as a state of suffering. Thinking of inevitability of death and shortness of human life may help in overcoming laziness and doing right thing now. The powers of passions have to be overcome by constant practice, and dire miseries have to be forsaken. Elusive character of emptiness of all things needs to be realized. Anitya, emptiness. Soul and mind both have to be controlled when crossing the gate of balance, vairagya, as mentioned, vice of silence. Control of the soul means the aspirant have no desire even for the liberation of the soul. To generate endeavors, we need four supports: aspiration, firmness, joy, and moderation. Aspiration is developed by reflecting on karma, on cause and effect. Firmness comes from self-confidence, not involving pride. We should do right work with joyful delight, what we consider right, by viveka. Moderation is required when we become physically and mentally exhausted and are unable to continue. The interest in occult science assists in enduring of spiritual progress. A student has to conquer all doubt, skepticism, scorn, ridicule, envy, and temptation. In words of a master, he would see beyond, had to first destroy his living wall, that he must be possessed of a heart and soul clad in steel, and of an iron, never failing determination, and yet be meek and gentle, humble, and have shut out from his heart every human passion that leads to evil. So, concluding, a study of true philosophy of life, like theosophy, and practicing its principles in our living will definitely save us from the obstructive influence of the dual threshold, which each sadhaka is bound to face, as not only to test, not only to create an obstacle in his path, but to test also his sincerity and intensity of devotion to the path. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a wonderful talk. Uh, the PDF of this talk has been shared in the groups. So all of you can read that after this talk also.
Yes.
We open up now for any questions or additions. Thank you, Jaishiji, for your comment. I just want to bring this point that HPD in 1875, uh, before the Theosophical Society was started, she has written to Colonel Olcott, and these are her words. Remember my 7 years, preliminary initiation, trials, danger, and fighting with all the incarnated evils and legions of devils. So even she had to fight her dweller of the threshold. So what the question I had in my mind, sir, is uh, at what phase of the journey can we expect? Do you think even in the beginning phases we will face these kind of problems, or do you think it comes somewhere little bit for a more advanced student?
I know theosophical literature, what I have able to connect and read and study, it shows clearly that even from the earlier stages, one feels if he's sincerely trying to follow path. Because every human being has certain weaknesses and bad tendencies, which he has for the social ethic, for social morality, he has tried to hide inside. But once we start journey sincerely in the path, they come out. And that is the law, Blodsky says. They come out, and then we feel their effect and impact, which have otherwise not experienced. So those do come even at early stage and also at later stage also, depending upon the intensity and the age from which we have cultivated them. As it is mentioned in these notes which I have shared with you, this comes from the previous incarnations also, these habits and traits which have accumulated in our mental body and astral body. And not only that, our age as a society and the community in which is born, their idea, their wrong influences, their wrong ideas also, they are affecting our the mental bodies and astral planes, and they also face us right from the start of journey and up to the time when we become free of that.
Right from the beginning till the end, the dweller of the threshold can be expected at any time. That is the message. Thank you, Sushma ji, for your comment. Okay, I think there are no more questions or queries. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank
And
you.
nice to hear that you're going to be talking on the Brahma Sutras next also. Thank you very much. So let's all join together in the closing prayer. Asatoma Satkame, Tamasoma Jyotirgame, Mrityorma Amritam Gam. Om Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone.